Over the past few hours, police in Poland began to clear blockades going into Ukraine, allowing supplies to start flowing back into that country, of course, over the past few weeks. Polish truckers and show of solidarity saying enough is enough. Stop importing things in from Ukraine at a very cheap price when Polish farmers, Polish truckers are being slammed. So it looks like a lot of this is now flowing back into Ukraine once again. Overnight, we saw, of course, Poland has a new prime minister, Donald Tusk. And what does this mean for the future of Poland? A lot of people coming out saying, well, he's going to undo a lot of the immigration policies, a lot of the conservative policies that have been put in place and sort of opened Poland to a mass wave of migration. And joining us today on 42 years ago on this very day, we saw, of course, history tells us that Poland instituted martial law to clamp down on opposition protesters. They rolled tanks into the streets of Warsaw, censored the media, or so they tell us. Did that stave off a Soviet invasion? So a lot of things happening in Poland on this 42nd anniversary of martial law. We thought we'd bring in Mike Krupa, who is a journalist in Warsaw, Poland, host of Votum TV, to make sense of all of it. Mike, who would have thought Poland would be the center of discussion right now in Europe? A lot of major changes. First of all, can you talk about this blockade? What does this mean for Ukraine? What does this mean for the Polish truckers?
Well, hello, Clayton. It's great to be back. Well, first of all, in terms of the blockade, what we have to realize is that yesterday we got news that the mayor of one of the districts where the blockade was taking place on the border crossing in Dorohusk, I believe, he came out with a decision that the arrangement between him and the truckers was apparently broken by the truckers' side. And he says the law was broken, so we're going to have to end the blockade. Now, the truckers said they didn't break any arrangements. They wanted to continue. However, it was reported yesterday that at least 100 trucks on that crossing made their way to Ukraine. So there was a back and forth. Apparently, the mayor did threaten to use police force to get the truckers out of there. But you have to realize the truckers that are there, I mean, there's a lot of them there. So if the police were to engage them in sort of a brawl, it would kind of look ugly on television, especially with the new government just being inaugurated in Poland, the new left liberal government of Donald Tusk. So I'm pretty sure in terms of optics, that would not be something that anybody in Poland would like to see. However, there are some rumblings because it was four border crossings out of 8 with Ukraine that were blocked. So the Ukrainians are appealing to open up the other ones. The truckers are somewhat reluctant, although from the decisions coming from the EU, from the trade commissioner, and from the signs that are coming from the newly formed government, although they haven't been really adamant about this thus far, but I'm guessing what's going to happen is that, and if you believe what Donald Tusk said, I believe yesterday or today, that one of the first priorities of this government is to keep the flow of global help to Ukraine, as he called it, going. So it's sort of like reminiscent of, Mike Johnson becoming speaker. And the first thing he says is, by the way, my priority is going to be giving how many billion more to Israel. So it's that same mentality, Poland last, Ukraine first. Now, the question is how long that will last. The truckers, they're still there. The blockade on one border crossing has been dropped. Apparently, the Slovak truck drivers have been signaling to the Polish truckers, and I think they did a blockade yesterday for a few hours. It's been a back and forth on Slovakia. There's always been appeal because what happens is they wanted this to be a united front, so get the Hungarians in, get the Slovaks in, and get the Poles in. So you basically create this wide wall, a barrier that would prevent the Ukrainians coming into the European Union without a permit. That's one thing. So you're basically undercutting prices for all the truckers that are in the European Union and destroying their businesses. But another thing is, you're bringing a lot of weird things into Ukraine. There have been reports of motorboats going into Ukraine, Ferraris going into Ukraine. Somebody obviously wants to make off with a lot of money after the entire Kiev regime collapses. Obviously, they're saying that, these Polish truckers are working for Vladimir Putin because they're not allowing military aid and humanitarian aid. And the truckers have been very adamant that those are actually the things that they've been letting through, but everything else has to be stopped. So that's where we're at today.
Yeah, we've seen video images. We've shown them here on the show of full full trucks filled with luxury cars. And Polish truckers are saying, why is this being delivered into Ukraine? Like, why are luxury goods flowing in? You talk about motorboats and all sorts of luxury goods. Why is that stuff flowing into Ukraine?
Well, as I said, Ukraine is the Somalia of Europe. When you have a a country that is the most corrupt country in Europe. That's basically a country in the thralls of war. The regime is collapsing. I think you need a lot. Well, it's kind of interesting because you would actually think that a lot of those products would be going the other way, so leaving Ukraine. But maybe they know that the only place that they can escape some of these people in Kiev is going to be Western Ukraine, and it's better to have the toys there than throw them outside the country just in case the EU reinstates the permit system again. So, but obviously, this is not military help, and this is going to people who I don't think have the best interest of the Ukrainian people at heart. I think the only thing that they really care about is how much they're lining their pockets.
Donald Tusk is the new prime minister, of course, put in power over the past 24 hours. A lot of people upset about this online, as you mentioned, lefty liberal. A lot of conservatives saying, this is going to lead to mass migration from many third world countries. He's going to bring Poland much closer to the European Union, that he's a European Union shill. As you mentioned, Poland last, Europe first. So what do you make of this new prime minister, and what do you think this portends for the Polish people?
Well, I don't expect anything good in terms of the political agenda and any serious reforms that we need. Like, for example, a Poland first patriotic immigration reform, which we desperately need if we want to remain Poland, basically. So, there's a slogan going around, keep Poland Polish. That's somehow racist, apparently, and anti-Semitic, as some people, I don't know why, but whatever. But in terms of policy, I don't expect anything good. However, because this coalition is made up of essentially four parties, so we got the Civic Platform, which is Donald Tusk, and they are the main party. We have the Polish Peasants Party. We have what's called Poland 2050. So these are basically liberal voters who once voted for Tusk, but then believed he sort of became too lousy in governing, so they created a new party. And then we have the ultra-hard left, which is basically called the left in Poland. These are the ultra-wokesters, the turbo diesel wokesters, as some people call them. So there's basically four parties making up this coalition. Now, from the names that I've seen that will be in the new government, we have, for example, Radoslaw Sikorski, the husband of Anne Applebaum, coming back to take over the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
He's the guy that famously tweeted after the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, famously tweeted out, "Thank you, America," and then doubled down on it, and then later deleted that tweet.
Yeah, that's it. That's Radoslaw Sikorski. The interesting thing about Radoslaw Sikorski, though, is that if you look at his bio and look at some of the things he did, like, for example, in 2014, in February 2014, he was actually in Kiev mediating the talks between the opposition and the President Yanukovych at the time. And there's this famous scene as they're coming out. This was before February 24th. They're coming out of the negotiations, and the Ukrainians are the opposition, the ruling party right now, in essence, in Ukraine, is complaining to Sikorski that, we gave too much. And Sikorski said, if you don't comply with this, you're all going to be dead tomorrow. So he was basically telling them, sit down, end this entire Maidan rebellion, because you're not going to have a country anymore, which sort of seemed like a realist sentiment at the time. But as soon as, the neo-Nazi guys came in the next day, as soon as Yanukovych was forced to flee, Sikorski changed his tune. So he's very unreliable in terms of keeping his words, because let's not forget that it was Poland and Germany at the time that were the guarantors of this sort of ceasefire between the opposition and the Yanukovych administration. So, yeah, Radoslaw Sikorski is coming back. We're obviously going to have Donald Tusk as prime minister. We're going to have I forgot her name. I think it's Barbara Nowacka. She's going to be minister of education, heavy duty wokesters. So I'm pretty sure a lot of conservative parents organizations are going to get a new flow of energy in the next couple of months. But the essential question right now is, it's a four-party coalition. The Polish state-run companies, Polish state television, for example, which is a multi-billion-dollar operation. That's a huge pie to divide, and everybody's going to want to have a piece. And I'm predicting, and I think I already predicted this on your show back in October, that within 18 months before a new president is elected in Poland, this coalition is going to collapse, because there's going to be too many inconsistencies and there's going to be too many dividing lines between these four parties that they're going to call early elections. That's my prediction. We've actually never had a four-party ruling coalition in Poland ever. The most we've ever had was two-party in terms of individual parties, but four parties, that's something we haven't seen before, at least not that I'm aware of after 1989. Someone might correct me in the comments. But yeah, 4 parties, a lot to cut up. So I'm giving them 18 months before this house of cards collapses, hopefully.
And what's going to happen under this new administration with the millions of Ukrainian refugees that are in Poland? Will that change the dynamic there at all?
Well, I think one of the preferred. I'm not sure if you actually got the nomination, but the candidate for Minister of Justice is one Adam Bodnar, and Adam Bodnar used to be the ombudsman for human rights in Poland. So a few years back, he tweeted that wouldn't it be wonderful if the new Ukrainian arrivals in Poland, this was a year or two before the war, the new arrivals in Poland would be able to vote at least in local elections. We should give them voting rights at least in local elections. And if you looked at the web of NGOs, some of them you can directly connect to George Soros, things calling themselves Center for Migrant Rights and so on and so on. There was already a push, at least since 2016, 2017, to prepare the ground for turning Poland into a sort of Ukraino-Poland multicultural entity. You're not going to bring 1 million Muslims into Poland because Muslims are brown. That's a totally different religion. Poles are going to get pissed. But Ukrainians, we can sort of justify that. We get the cheap labor. They're white. They're formerly Christian. You only see the differences after some time. But they're there, obviously. So I think the agenda of this government, sadly, is going to be to ramp up this multicultural narrative that these Ukrainians that came to Poland before the war, and especially after the war, we need to be hospitable. We need to host them. They have to get a lot of, the social help that the regular Polish citizens get, and so on and so on. And, oh, by the way, why don't we bring in more and more and more? And especially if Bodnar becomes Minister of Justice, you can see an acceleration of this multicultural drive towards what many are calling Ukraino-Poland, which is being slowly formed in our, right before us by the ruling elites and the globalists in Warsaw, unfortunately.
Well, so you'll have a new name. It won't be Poland anymore. Ukraino-Poland. Ukraino-Poland.
Ukraino-Poland, exactly.
Ukraino-Poland. Unbelievable. And given voting rights, making a total change to the country. We're out of time, but Mike, I really want to thank you so much for this perspective. Really interesting to see what's happening with this blockade, the new government there, and on this 42nd anniversary of this martial law, which it's very interesting to dive more deeply into that. And I think you would say maybe read, I guess, beneath the headlines a little bit. It's not as it seems, right? That there's more to that story than just martial law, right?
Yeah, as a historian by training, I can say that I've done a lot of revisionist research on this topic in the last couple of years. And whereas at one point in my life, I would believe that General Wojciech Jaruzelski, God rest his soul, was the ultimate villain in Polish history, it turns out that somebody was weaving a narrative to, convince people that he was the worst villain in Polish history. He might not have been the best of guys, but there's a whole new school of thought pertaining to martial law, where it turns out that actually the Soviets were seriously contemplating an invasion. And there's a lot of evidence to point out that Jaruzelski introduced martial law first and foremost to stave off the Soviet invasion, and not, as the mainstream story goes, to crush solidarity, crush the opposition, and so on. So that's obviously a discussion for another time, but there is a new school of thought in Poland on this. And 42 years ago, a lot of sane people saw this, but unfortunately for years they were censored. Now these new voices are coming out with younger historians, and I hope that discussion will keep on going, because maybe it's not the most important thing that millennials are thinking about in Poland right now, but it's certainly something that sheds light on our geopolitical situation, for example, after 1989, and why many of the things that occurred indeed occurred.
Stopping a communist invasion. It's worth exploring those documents that have been declassified over the past few years, the CIA documents on this martial law situation. Yes, truth, shining a light on truth and transparency is always important. Mike, great to see you. Thank you for always bringing in an astute level of conversation to the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.